Okay, hello everyone. I'm doing the Digestive System 1 and I'm Gabrielle. So first I'm just going to start off with what the digestive system is. It contains the GI tract and the accessory digestive organs, which work together to allow us to eat, digest, and excrete our food. And the main functions are to break down the foods we eat, to release nutrients, and to absorb nutrients into our body. Now for what makes up the digestive system, we have the alimentary canal and the accessory digestive organs. In the canal is the mouth, the pharynx, the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, and the esophagus. And the accessory digestive organs are the salivary glands, the gallbladder, the pancreas, the teeth, and the liver. And we'll be going into a couple of these in more depth later on in the lesson. So what makes up the digestive tract further is that there is 4 tissue layers, the mucosa, the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. And as you can see in the figure below, we have each of those labeled. So the mucosa is the innermost layer in the bottom left hand. If you go a little bit above that, it shows the submucosa. Next is the muscularis externa, and then the outermost is the serosa. So going into more depth about the mucosa, it is the innermost layer, which I had said previously. Its 2 main functions are to secrete mucus and digestive enzymes and to absorb the nutrients from the foods we eat. The mucosa has 3 layers within it. The epithelium, which makes up most of the length of the GI tract, the lamina propria, which contains many blood and lymphatic vessels that serve to transport nutrients to other parts of the body through the alimentary canal. It also houses lymphocytes, which are serving as an immune function for our body. And then lastly, the muscularis mucosae is a thin layer of smooth muscle. It pulls the mucosa of the stomach and small intestine into folds. And what these folds primarily do is increase the surface area, which helps aid in the absorption of our food and nutrients and the digestion. For the submucosa, it is a layer of dense connective tissue, which connects the mucosa to the muscularis externa. It is that layer in between. It contains lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, and mucosal glands, which release digestive secretions. And the submucosa is innervated by a network of nerve cells called the mucosal plexus, which regulates digestive secretions into the lumen. For the muscularis externa, it is a double layer of smooth muscle, one layer being an inner circular layer and the other being an outer longitudinal layer. In the middle of these 2 layers is a network of nerves called the mesenteric plexus. The mesenteric plexus serves the role of motility, which helps move the food along the tract and in the stomach to promote mechanical digestion. And the proximal and distal regions of the alimentary canal, where the muscularis externa is made up of skeletal muscle, is the mouth, the pharynx, the upper esophagus, and anus. So pretty much the skeletal muscle is included in these areas because it allows for voluntary control over defecation and swallowing, which are definitely important in the anus region and the mouth for sure. So that's why that skeletal muscle is included there. For the serosa, it is the outermost layer of the digestive tract. And it is only found in the digestive organs in the peritoneal cavity, which is around the abdomen area. The serosa is a serous membrane that secretes serous fluid to stop abrasion between organs. And as for the digestive organs above the diaphragm, there is a sheath of collagen fibers called an adventita, which goes in place of the serosa, and it functions to hold the organs in place. For the structure of the oral cavity, I have a photo to the right, which points out many of the things included in the oral cavity, which is the gums, the lips, the teeth, the cheeks, the tongue, and the palate frame. So each of those are located. I highlighted a couple of them so you could point them out. And if you can see down at the bottom of the picture, there is something labeled called the oral vestibule. That is the space between the teeth and the gums on the inside by the cheeks and the lips on the outside. And as you can see, it's labeled right there in the middle at the bottom of it, right by the lip. And the anterior region of the palate is created by the maxillary and palatine bones of the skull and is known as the hard plate. You can see the hard plate is labeled like the upper left area. It's kind of like the roof of your mouth area around there. And then the soft palate is where the tissue is a little bit fleshier and it is mainly composed of skeletal muscle. The function of the soft plate or soft palate is the movements of the chewing and swallowing, yawning, singing, things like that, where you're moving your mouth and stretching it. That area has room for stretch and things like that. And then the oral cavity is lined with a stratified squamous epithelium, which helps to protect the mouth from mechanical and chemical damages from food during chewing, things we're eating. The stratified squamous epithelium is definitely needed to help protect our mouths while we are eating. And for the tongue, it is a powerful skeletal muscle that facilitates ingestion, mechanical digestion, which is chewing, and chemical digestion. The tongue is attached to the mandible, the styloid process of the temporal bones, and the hyoid bone. And the rest of the mouth, like the rest of the mouth, the tongue is covered with the stratified squamous epithelium, again, as I previously said, for protective purposes, while eating and chewing. And the top and the sides of the tongue are studded with ridges called palpebrae. You can see those at the bottom of the picture to the right. There's the fungiform and the filiform, which are labeled onto the tongue. And a fold of mucous membrane on the underside of the tongue is the lingual frenulum. It tethers the tongue to the floor of the mouth. So if you feel right below your tongue, that little flap that connects your tongue to the bottom of your mouth, that is called the lingual frenulum. And it just keeps that tongue stabilized in place. On to the pharynx. It has three subdivisions. The nasopharynx, which is the most superior, and that is involved in only breathing and speech, while the orthopharynx and the laryngopharynx are included in both breathing and digestion. I labeled those three subdivisions on the photo to the right. It's in the purple area, and as you can see where it's located, it is definitely right off the mouth. It goes into the pharynx and connects to the larynx from the oral cavity. And it is stratified squamous epithelium, and the muscularis externa consists of skeletal muscle to give us control over the swallowing process. And the most superficial layer of the pharynx is called the amandita, as I previously mentioned in a previous slide. Since it is made up of connective tissue, it is not located within the peritoneum. Onto the esophagus. It is a muscular tube that connects the pharynx to the stomach. Its lumen is lined with stratified squamous epithelium as well. The muscularis externa transitions from skeletal muscle near the pharynx to smooth muscle near the stomach. So in my picture to the right, you can see probably the area around the esophagus right at the beginning where it starts. That's probably where that skeletal muscle resides. And then as it moves closer to the lower esophageal sphincter, that's probably where it moves into the smooth muscle as it gets closer to the stomach. Now for the stomach, there are four main regions, the cardia, fundus, body, and pleuris. And the wall of the stomach is made of the same four layers as most of the rest of the alimentary canal, but with adaptations to the mucosa and muscularis externa layers for the unique functions of the stomach. In addition to the typical circular and longitudinal smooth muscle layers. The muscularis externa in the stomach has a third inner oblique smooth layer, and the stomach mucosa layer consists of simple columnar epithelium that forms the large folds called ruwage. And the mucosa layer consists of columnar epithelial cells and surface mucus cells, which secrete a protective coat of alkaline mucus, which pretty much helps just protect the stomach area. Now to compare and contrast the gross anatomy and function of the small and large intestines. You can see in the picture in the middle, the small intestine is the more pink area, and the large intestine kind of wraps around it in a more pale area. The small intestine is a tube divided into 3 regions: the duodenum, the ileum, and the jejunum. The small intestine functions in the digestion of food and the absorption of nutrients, while the large intestine stretches from the appendix to the anus and is also divided into 3 regions: the syncytium, the rectum, and the colon. But the large intestine functions in digestion of water and production of vitamins. So they definitely have 2 very different functions. Now, lastly, the pathway of food. So the pathway of food is an entry into the oral canal and exits as feces. So this whole process begins with the mouth as you chew and ingest and break down food through mechanical digestion within the mouth. The tongue and the soft palate then push the food down into the pharynx. As you can see, it's labeled mouth, then tongue, then pharynx. Then the food moves down the pharynx into the esophagus, where the food then meets the sphincter. So then, as you can see in the picture, a pharynx and moves into the esophagus, and the sphincter is the area right above the stomach. So the sphincter opens and allows food to pass into the stomach. So next it goes from the sphincter to the stomach, which is pretty much the holding cavity. And as food is held in the stomach, enzymes are working to break the food down into a soupy mixture through chemical digestion at this point. And then once it is ready to move out of the stomach, it moves into the small intestine where digestion occurs. And this is where the most nutrients are absorbed. So now we are down by the small intestine. And after it leaves the small intestine, it moves into the large intestine. And in this area, this is where the stool and the waste left over kind of goes to any residual food that wasn't absorbed. And that is where, in the large intestine, the colon area, that is where the water is then absorbed and the product of feces is created and is emptied out through the rectum and then out through the anus. So pretty much a quick overview is mouth to pharynx to esophagus to stomach to small intestine to large intestine or colon to the rectum and then out to the anus. So just a couple questions to quiz yourselves. Which is the correct pathway of food through the body? Then there is, what are the 3 subdivisions of the pharynx? And what are the 4 tissue layers of the digestive tract? If you need a couple more minutes, just pause and then continue. And then here are the correct answers, A, and C. Thank you so much. Have a great day.